again, my dears. Welcome back to another sermon here for the Ministry of Christ under the Order of Divine Mysticism. I am your matron of Ancestral Mothers, Mimi, and it is so good to see you again. How was your week? How have things been since the last sermon? Did you do any fun soul searching? Anything interesting pop up? I want to know because this sermon is going to be a little bit different than the one for Ashra, where previously it was introducing you to the Mother, the Celestial Mother, the Heavenly Mother. This is a reflective, introspective ideal for the Mother of Mothers. And, I know that I've quoted dogma before, but the line that the Muse gives, which is women have been painted as bigger antagonists than the Egyptians and Romans combined, still stands out after all these years. What we need to know that is, as long as the Bible is quoted for justification for the reason why one belief or another regarding women is used against us, the value of understanding text and social constructs from that world is the most important thing we can do. Because of this, I dug into the history of the woman of Israel. And the thing that I found is that the constructs and the ideas that we find are really only of the men that were in charge. This gives the illusion that women were initially subservient because the only records we have were the temple priests, the kings, the people in the army, generals and things like that, the prophets even. All of these things give the superficial idea that women were less than men. And it all starts back with Eve, who was made to be Adam's servant, or Adam's helpmeet, or subservient to Adam, whatever it is. When the truth is that when you look at nature and how God had made everything before humans, they were pretty equal. When you think of the rural woman in Palestine, in Israel, Mesopotamia, Egypt, there were lots of things, especially in slavery, where women were left as less than nothing. But the overall theme was that they were the mothers, the caregivers, but also the ones running everything. Before I got to know Eve, I had to go back and really dig into this idea and this concept. So many of the stories we are told are from the perspective of being a biblical woman, right? Many of us struggle with the concepts of things like sin and strife being laid mainly on the shoulders of women in the Bible, particularly Eve, as well as being dismissed from their rightful place. If we look at Deborah and Phoebe, Old Testament, New Testament, they had the same space as the men, but are often left to the wayside because of that single mistranslated sentence from Paul that women should be silent in the church. The authoritative power put into Scripture is why it has been so difficult to find Eve as the inspirational mother that she should be, not as the antagonist that she's painted as. Another thing I noticed is that aside from when she's banished from the garden and she is made to give birth, there is very little information and understanding on what Eve does in the Bible. For the Mother of Mothers, you would think she'd have a little bit more, even though she has this universal sin laid upon her, right? She's the reason everyone was expelled from Eden, etc., etc. we look at the way that it's contrasted still in the Bible, whereas like even some of the founding fathers of the church have gone so far as to say that Mother Mary's obedience reverses Mother Eve's disobedience. And so she is constantly diminished and constantly left behind because Mother Mary was given exaltation, instead of them both being important to the structure of our lives and the way that we hold this faith. It also wasn't until much later that modern scholars and rabbis and poets even put sanctity on Eve's name and being. There are moments where comparing her creation to the creation of the tabernacle brought forth this validity of her divinity and drew together the creation of family and connecting man to God. In my exploration of her, just as with Asherah, I was influenced by noticing patterns and correlations and drawing conclusions based on different readings. As pointed out in different parts of historical literature, Eve's purpose was echoed through the Canterbury Tales by Chaucer, and he made her explicitly Adam's helpmate. That is where we get a lot of that from, and that is where the extrapolation of that translation goes through. Milton also drew on Eve in Paradise Lost, and he explained how beautiful she was, the most beautiful creature in all of creation to ever have been created. But he also made her very childish, very irresponsible, and driven only by passion and impulses. I don't know about you, but it seems like they're still setting her up to be a woman of hysterics, very emotional and not level-headed, and I feel like that's not fair to her at all. The notable poet and feminist Yocheved Bat-Miriam, probably ruined that name, depicts Eve as a proud and free spirit instead, who is mysterious in her embodiment of death, transitions, secrecy, keeping wisdom, and incredible imagination and creativity. A lot of this actually kind of reminds me of echoes of Lilith, especially as we take her and put her into historical references where she was supposed to stand side by side. A few months ago, when I thought I need to do a series on this, on women, and turn it into something, somebody needs to hear this, I sat in full meditation. I met our Mother of Mothers in a place where at the edge of the water, sand and vegetation joined under our feet. We didn't look at one another. We watched the way the world unfolded in an inhale and an exhale, as if it were as natural as breathing, the way things came up and went down. Because just as Adam was given the task to be a steward of the animals, so too was Eve. Man was supposed to watch over the animals. And I can't help but feel a little bit of that wild woman. And by wild, I mean a full connection to the earth. Someone who is grounded in a way I don't know if I'll ever be. I got a sense of the energy of who she was. Now, I don't have, something as wonderful and as vivid as Sarah with her deity readings. That is her skill and talent. But when I sat with her, there was an overwhelming feeling of still carrying around this wound of the whole world without bitterness. It was really more sadness that her trial, her sacrifice, was forgotten. In as many ways as Prometheus stole the fire, Eve partook of wisdom and knowledge. With the free will God had given her, and with the availability of Asherah being and knowing wisdom, I continue to feel like she wants to be recognized as the mother of mothers again. She wants to be known and understood as the connection, the first real connection between God and creation. When I tried to dig deeper, there was almost like the modern understanding, like a veil dropped over, and that energy is scapegoat. That energy is eldest daughter. Considering we are children of God, I thought that was a very appropriate feeling and like echoing in my head. And this includes all of the traumas that can come with that. The sacrifice that is not seen for the sake of the greater good. Being the peacemaker, being the caregiver, being the one who digs deep, even in faith, and makes it work. Because let's not forget that Eve continued to raise her children following God. She still held her faith even after the punishment, even after the sacrifice. I remember trying to hug Eve. I needed her to see that she is a mother, a sister, and she is me, and I am her. Eve is every woman, but she is also a pinnacle of strength because she carried the creation of people on her shoulders and in her womb. And with that, we are going to go over the correlations that I found to be with her through soul searching, the UPG, the time that I spent with her in meditation, and just as I could dig and take tendrils here and there of who she was and what that was. First of all, we're going into the Jasper family, the Muakite, the Australian Jasper. It has that feeling of tune your ears to wisdom. There's that book, The Rocks Cry Out, and I remember seeing it. There's a Bible verse about it. And there was a lot of Asherah references alongside it. Whereas this stone also represents beauty, adventure, grounding, centering, and healing yourself through centering and focus. And if you had to ask me if I could just put it to one, it would probably be that stone. The other one is that there are a lot of Tree of Wisdom and lore that can tie to the Tiger's Eye. Think about Tiger's Eye when you make a decision with discernment and wisdom. I feel like following your free will with knowledge really ties into that. And the last one would be Amber. Not only just for grounding, but because it is a true connection to creation. And I think that with how we see Eve and bringing her back to where she needs to be, that would be a great thing. Whether it's the essential oil or the stone, that would be a great thing to add if you're trying to dig deeper with her. Now, I did do some digging and reading and just trying to remember the general things, and I went with a list of herbs. There's only a couple. I picked holy basil for her strength and her endurance. I also picked thyme, and I picked thyme for courage, obviously, but Eve showed courage in the face of adversity. As somebody who knew little in the ways of the world, suddenly thrust into the world, and still managed to live, raise children, worship God. I also correlate the dandelion with her for her absolute endurance and faithfulness. And last but not least, I chose Motherwort for the emotional heart, connecting to the first mother, and for helping to heal that wound in ourselves spiritually and mentally and emotionally. Other things that I correlated with her, the first one would be mushrooms. I know what you're thinking. Mimi, that's decay. That's finding your resources. And for a woman in the desert with very few options for water and food and hunting, that tells me she knows what she's doing and she pulls things through the cycle. That's why I think of her in mushrooms. Looking at trees, going to have to say the olive tree. And I say the olive tree because in that area, Mesopotamia, Arabia, all of that in the past, the olive tree was resistance, was endurance, and it turned into the income and the support for households. Who does that sound like? That sounds like a mom to me. I don't know about you, but another one would be small streams of water. So whereas Asherah was like the actual sea, I felt like Eve was more the rivulets, the small streams that came through, because even with the bare minimum, she still sustained life. And I feel like that's actually really poignant for her. As far as animals that I associated, same thing goes. The Arabian wolf, which is a subspecies of the gray wolf. You don't have to come for me about wolves, but they live in small packs. They scavenge and they hunt. They sustain their young. They are basically the equivalent of the mushrooms. They make it work. They make do. And that is exactly the spirit that I feel like she embodies. She's also, to me, staves and swords in symbolism, tool, and tarot. And I say that because you need to be able to have a passion in you and wisdom and understanding. You got to have the gumption. Do you know what I'm saying? So I feel like both of those work really well with her. And I want to know if you found anything interesting that you think works with her. And I'd love to hear it, okay? You can say it in the Discord. You can say it in the comments below, whichever one you want to do. But for now, we're going to have a reading. Did I find a little candle? Yes, I did. Did I accidentally get holy basil all over my thing? Yes, I did. Ignore that. All right. Now, I know I prayed last time at the beginning. I'm going to pray now over the cards. Heavenly Father and Mother, we come before you to understand, to reach out and to heal that wound of the eldest daughter, of the forgotten mother, of the one who carries the weight of all responsibility and blame, to Eve, the mother of mothers, of humankind. We seek your voice, your wisdom, and things you could tell us. Oh, there was one more. Amusing how I said swords were her card. Don't you think? I think. I also find it funny that she is walking on the desert, past mountains, with the sprigs of leaves just joining us. And what is this in here? Is that an owl? I think it's an owl. For wisdom. Another symbol of wisdom. The Five of Cups. This is the ache, the deep ache that I was talking about. the Six of Swords, the Moon. And I find this card, when it comes up in my readings, to always be so funny. But I feel like it's not only touching mothers to daughters, it's also touching crones to maidens and every phase that's reaching through. Asherah here with the ocean, mother to daughter. Then also the Empress. What another fitting card for the mother. We will not forget. You are in fact the mother. This is telling me one thing really big. And that is, I am here. You have found me. You have called to me. I am here. You have sought me and found my despair, but also my hope. You have found me and seen the decisions that I made for the best. The decisions made with discernment. You have found me as I try to reach to you, as I try to be the mother to the daughter and the daughter to the mother. You see me as mother, as queen, as the one who carries this responsibility, this a gift of creation in life. And to me, that is incredible and beautiful. Thank you, Eve. We know that you're here. I would even go so far as to say that not only does Eve have passion, but especially with this card here, she is logic. She did not simply go along as it has been painted over and over again. She made the decisions knowingly. And not because she wanted to defy God. The feeling that I get from it is that when the wisdom was there to be delighted in, the free will to take it, it was less about temptation and more about understanding what it could be. I do not think she was childish, and I do not think she was blind. And I say this because the time that passes between creation and when this expulsion happens seems to be far longer, because there was reference in one of the verses in Genesis where it talks about how she and Adam laid together to create more, which shows obviously they were able to do something to go make some babies. I'm just going to leave it at that so we don't get kicked from YouTube. But as a mother, I personally do everything in my power to learn as much as I can for my children, to take in as much as I understand, to do better by them. Because when you know better, you do better. And this is one of those cases, I feel. Now, this could just be conjecture. Don't get me wrong. It could just be me putting my ideals over Eve. But wouldn't it be something to be able to see her and say, I see you? To be able to feel her and say, I know you. Perhaps forgiving ourselves of our own traumas and the responsibilities that we take upon ourselves is also here. Perhaps we are just as deserving of forgiveness and understanding as Eve. Thank y'all so much for joining us today. Now, I know this sermon was pretty short, and I apologize. I am a short and sweet kind of gal, but I hope that this brings you a little bit closer to your devotion, to your understanding, and maybe taking a step forward in faith and with critical thinking. Please be safe, be blessed, and I'll see you soon.